My name's Elizabeth, and I just turned 17 when my life took a wild turn. Let me paint you a picture of my family. On the surface, we seemed decent enough. Dad worked his ass off, and Mom stayed home. I had a little sister, Amy, who was 12 years younger than me. Dad was a big shop manager at this company that belonged to my maternal grandmother. Grandma was a real go-getter. She started with a chain of laundromats, then expanded into making household chemicals and detergents for laundries. When she decided to retire, she offered the business to Mom. But she wasn't interested. So Dad stepped up and took over the company. That's when things started to get complicated. I remember the day it all went to shit. I was in my room, trying to focus on homework, when I heard Mom screaming at Dad downstairs. "You're nothing but a loser, John. This is my house, my family's business. You should be grateful I even let you run it." Things got worse over the next few weeks. Mom and Dad barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it usually ended in a shouting match. I tried to keep Amy distracted, but even at 5, she knew something was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home from school to find Dad in the living room, a suitcase at his feet. "Dad?" My voice cracked. "What's going on?" He walked over to me, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I can't stay here anymore. It's not good for anyone." I felt like I couldn't breathe. But what about Amy? What about me? Dad pulled back, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. "I love you both so much. Never forget that. But sometimes love isn't enough." He kissed my forehead, then walked over to Amy, who was watching us with wide, confused eyes. He knelt down, hugging her tightly. "Be good for your big sister, okay, pumpkin?" And just like that, he was gone. The door closed behind him with a finality that left me feeling hollow. Mom came home an hour later. When I told her Dad had left, she didn't seem surprised. She just nodded, like she'd been expecting it. "Good riddance," she muttered. "Mom, I couldn't believe what I was hearing." "How can you say that?" She turned to me, her eyes hard. "Your father cheated on me, Elizabeth. Multiple times. I couldn't take it anymore." That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear Mom on the phone in her room. She was laughing, sounding happier than I'd heard her in months. I wondered who she was talking to, but I was too exhausted to care. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated after Dad left, Mom dropped another bombshell on us. "Girls," she announced one morning over breakfast, "I have some news. I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my cereal. "What? Mom, Dad's only been gone for 2 months." She waved her hand dismissively. "Sometimes, true love comes unexpectedly, Elizabeth. You'll understand when you're older." Robert moved in a week later. He was, okay, I guess. Tall, good-looking in that generic way that makes people say, "Oh, he seems nice." But something about him rubbed me the wrong way from the start. He made an effort with Amy, playing games with her and helping her with her homework. But with me? It was like I barely existed. Meanwhile, changes were happening at the company too. Mom had taken over after Dad left, and she brought Robert in to work with her. They seemed to make a good team, always huddled together, discussing business strategies. I tried to focus on my own life, school, friends, the usual teenage stuff. But it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own family. Things came to a head when Mom and Robert announced they were opening a new branch of the company in another city. "We're moving," Mom told me one evening. "It's a great opportunity for the business. As for you, Robert and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you stay here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stay here? Without you?" "It's just that the new house won't have much space," she explained hurriedly. "And you're almost done with school. It wouldn't make sense to transfer now, right before your exams." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "So where am I supposed to live? On the street?" Don't be dramatic, Elizabeth, Mom scolded. You'll stay with your grandmother. She's already agreed to it. I stormed off to my room, slamming the door behind me. As I lay on my bed, hot tears of anger and hurt streaming down my face, I couldn't help but wonder, when did I become such an inconvenience to my own mother? The next few weeks were a blur of packing boxes and tearful goodbyes, not from me, but from Amy, who didn't want to leave her friends. I helped her pack, trying to put on a brave face for her sake. Will you come visit us, Lizzie? She asked, her big brown eyes full of tears. I hugged her tightly. Of course I will, squirt. You can't get rid of me that easily. The day they left, I stood on the porch with Grandma, watching as the moving van pulled away. Mom gave me a quick hug, Robert nodded awkwardly, and then they were gone, taking Amy with them. Living with Grandma wasn't as bad as I'd feared. She was cool in her own way, giving me space when I needed it, but always there with a cup of tea and a listening ear when I wanted to talk. Still, it wasn't home. My 18th birthday rolled around faster than I expected. I woke up that morning feeling weird. Like I should be excited, but all I felt was empty. Mom called, of course. Happy birthday, sweetie. Her voice was bright, almost too cheery. I'm sorry we can't be there. Work's just crazy right now. We'll celebrate when we visit next month, okay? I knew we wouldn't. They hadn't visited once since they left. Sure, Mom. Sounds great. Grandma must have sensed my mood because she went all out. She let me invite a few friends over, ordered my favorite food, even baked a cake herself. For a few hours, I almost forgot about everything else. The next morning, Grandma called me into her home office. She had the serious look on her face that made my stomach clench. Sit down, Elizabeth, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. We need to talk. Oh God, I thought. She's kicking me out. Where am I gonna go? But then she smiled, reached into her desk drawer, and pulled out a small folder. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Open it. I did, and nearly dropped it when I realized what I was looking at. Grandma, is this? She nodded, her eyes twinkling. The company is yours now, Elizabeth. I see potential in you, kiddo. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you'll do right by the business. But Mom and Robert, they're running it now. Grandma's face hardened slightly. They're running a branch. The main company, the heart of it all, that's yours now. I sat there, stunned. Me, barely 18, owner of a multi-million-dollar company? It felt like a dream. Or a nightmare. I don't know what to say. Grandma reached across the desk, squeezing my hand. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll give it your all. I nodded, still in shock. I will. I promise. She sat back, satisfied. Good. Now, I've got one more piece of advice for you, and I want you to listen carefully. I leaned in, hanging on her every word. Call your father. There's more to that story than you know. Talk to him. Take him on as a consultant if you want. But hear him out. It took me a week to work up the courage to call Dad. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I saw him, my heart clenched. He looked older, tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. There was an awkward silence. Then, suddenly, everything came pouring out. The divorce, Mom's remarriage, the move, Grandma's gift. Dad listened, his face a mix of emotions. When I finished, he took a deep breath. Lizzie, there's something you need to know about the divorce. And then he told me everything. How Mom had never respected him, constantly nagging and putting him down. How she called him a loser, made him feel worthless. How, after one particularly bad fight, he'd gotten drunk and made the biggest mistake of his life. I cheated on her, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. Once. I regretted it immediately, but your mother, she used it against me. Threatened to sue, to take everything. She demanded I leave, give her all the property, leave you kids. She even wanted alimony. I sat there, stunned. This didn't sound like the mother I knew. Or thought I knew. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Dad's eyes met mine, full of sadness and love. Because of you and Amy. I didn't want you to go through a messy, public divorce. I thought it would be easier this way. As we talked, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my dad back. Before we left, I took a deep breath and asked, Dad, how would you feel about helping me with the company? As a consultant? The smile that spread across his face was answer enough. The months flew by in a whirlwind of studying, exams, and late-night cram sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage at my high school graduation, diploma in hand. Grandma was in the audience, beaming with pride. Mom and Robert were conspicuously absent, but I'd learned not to expect much from that quarter. As summer rolled in, I threw myself into college applications. With Grandma's encouragement and Dad's long-distance support, I set my sights high. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I could hardly believe it. But the real shocker came when I got the financial aid package from my top choice. Full ride, I breathed, staring at the letter in disbelief. Grandma hooped, pulling me into a bear hug. I knew you could do it, kiddo. All those late nights and competitions paid off. I'd chosen to major in business management. It seemed like the smart choice, given that I now had a company to run. The idea still felt surreal, but I was determined to make Grandma proud. To celebrate my college acceptance, Grandma insisted on throwing a little party. Just the two of us, some fancy takeout, and a bottle of sparkling cider. Grandma wasn't about to let me drink champagne, even if I was legally an adult now. We were halfway through our meal when the doorbell rang. Grandma frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. I'll get it, I said, putting down my fork. I opened the door and felt my stomach drop. There, looking annoyed and impatient, stood my mother and Robert. Before I could say anything, they brushed past me into the house. Mom didn't bother with pleasantries. Mother, we need to talk about the company. Now. I watched, stunned, as Mom launched into a tirade. She didn't even glance my way, didn't ask about graduation or college. It was like I wasn't even there. Why can't we access the main accounts, she demanded. And why are you blocking the transfer of capital to our subsidiary? Grandma's eyes narrowed. Because it's not your decision to make anymore, Helen. The company belongs to Elizabeth now. She's the one who'll decide its future and manage its finances. The room went dead silent. The tension in the room was palpable after Grandma's revelation about the company. I watched as a series of emotions flashed across Mom's face, shock, anger, and then, calculation. Suddenly, her entire demeanor changed. Elizabeth, sweetheart, she said, her voice soft and sickly sweet. I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? I blinked, caught off guard by this sudden change. Mom stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I instinctively stepped back. We've settled in so nicely in the new city. We have a beautiful house, and there's a room just for you. We could set up a desk, get you a new computer for your studies and work. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I'm happy here. I have my friends, my school. And Grandma needs me. Mom's smile faltered for a second before she rallied. Well, if that's the issue, we could always move back here. We could live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice? I shook my head. It's not about the house, Mom. It's everything. I saw the anger building in her eyes, barely contained. Before she could speak, I decided to ask the question that had been burning inside me for months. Mom, why did you really divorce Dad? She stiffened, caught off guard. Well, your father, he cheated on me. Multiple times. I was tired of it. He abandoned us for his mistress, didn't even pay alimony. That's not true, I said. Dad told me everything. There was only one time, and it was because of how you treated him. He didn't abandon us, you kicked him out. And he's been paying alimony regularly. Mom's face contorted with rage. How dare you? You ungrateful little brat. You have no right to meddle in my personal life. Everything here belongs to me, and I decide who lives where. Grandma, who had been quietly watching this exchange, finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm but filled with a steel I'd never heard before. That's quite enough, Helen, she said. You seem to have forgotten a few key points. This house? The company? They belong to me, not you. I gave the company to Elizabeth because I trust her judgment far more than I trust yours right now. I think it's time for you to leave. I watched, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest, as Grandma firmly ushered Mom and Robert out of the house. The door closed behind them with a final sounding click. As we stood there, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief wash over me. I'd lost something today, the last illusions I had about my mother. But I'd gained something too. A certainty about my path forward, and the knowledge that I wasn't alone on it. What now? I asked, my voice muffled against Grandma's shoulder. She pulled back, giving me a small smile. Now we get back to celebrating your college acceptance. And tomorrow, we start planning for your future, your real future, not the one your mother tried to force on you. The morning after the confrontation with Mom and Robert, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room. To my surprise, I saw Dad sitting on the couch, deep in conversation with Grandma. As I sat down next to them, Grandma explained why she'd called Dad over. I've been thinking about Amy, she said. Your mother, well, I'm not sure she's in the best position to care for her right now. I've suggested that your father seek custody of Amy. I felt a surge of hope. Really? Dad, are you going to do it? He ran a hand through his hair, looking both nervous and determined. Yeah, I am. It won't be easy, but Amy deserves better than what she's getting right now. I couldn't help it, I threw my arms around him. Thank you, Dad. As we pulled apart, Grandma cleared her throat. There's more, she said. I've hired a private investigator to look into your mother and Robert's affairs. Over the next few weeks, life fell into a strange new rhythm. I started my college classes, throwing myself into my studies with a determination I'd never felt before. Dad came over regularly, and we worked on rebuilding our relationship. It felt good, having him back in my life. Then, about 3 weeks after that morning conversation, Grandma called us both over. Her face was grave as we sat down. The investigator's report came in, she said without preamble. And, well, it's worse than we thought. She laid out the facts, each one hitting like a punch to the gut. Mom had been cheating on Dad for years, long before the divorce. Her affair with Robert had started while she was still married to Dad. There were hotel receipts, records of expensive gifts, all painting a damning picture. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Robert is a con man, Grandma said, her voice hard. He's done this before, seducing wealthy women, convincing them to move assets around, and then disappearing with the money. I felt sick. So when they wanted to move the company's capital? Grandma nodded. Exactly. He was planning to steal it all and run. We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Grandma said that we needed to confront Mom with the truth. The meeting was set for the next day. Mom arrived at Grandma's house looking annoyed and impatient. Her expression changed to one of surprise when she saw Dad there too. What followed was one of the most painful conversations I've ever been part of. Grandma laid out all the evidence, the affair, Robert's history of fraud, his plans to steal from the company. With each revelation, I watched my mother's face, hoping to see some sign of remorse or understanding. Instead, all I saw was denial. This is ridiculous, Mom sputtered. Robert loves me. He would never. You're all just jealous of our happiness. Dad tried to reason with her. Helen, please. Look at the evidence. Think about Amy. Is this really the kind of man you want around our daughter? But Mom wouldn't hear it. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. I don't have to listen to this. Robert is a good man, and I trust him completely. You're all just trying to ruin my life. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As we sat there, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of what was sure to be a long, difficult battle. But looking at Dad and Grandma, I knew I wasn't facing it alone. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Dad, with Grandma's unwavering support and her lawyer's expertise, filed for custody of Amy. I tried to stay focused on my studies, but it was hard not to get caught up in the drama unfolding around me. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I insisted on being there. The proceedings were grueling. Mom's lawyer tried to paint Dad as an absent father, but our lawyer came prepared. He presented evidence of Dad's consistent alimony payments, his attempts to stay in touch with us, and the stability of his current living situation. Then came the bombshell, the private investigator's report on Robert's fraudulent past and their plans to embezzle from the company. I watched Mom's face as the evidence was presented. She looked shocked, then angry, then lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When the judge announced his decision, granting Dad full custody of Amy, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Amy would be safe, sadness that it had come to this. As we left the courthouse, Amy in Dad's arms, Mom approached us. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. Grandma stepped between us. "Yes, Helen, it is. Go home." The hits kept coming for Mom after that. The judge ordered her to pay child support to Dad for Amy. It was a reversal that clearly shocked her. She'd always assumed she'd be the one receiving support, not paying it. I threw myself into my studies and learning about the company, trying to distance myself from the ongoing drama. But it was hard to ignore the satisfaction I felt when I heard that Robert had left Mom, running off with another woman and a significant chunk of Mom's personal savings. It was a crisp autumn evening when Dad called me, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Your mother showed up at my place today," he said. "She wanted to reconcile. Said she'd made a mistake, that she wanted us to be a family again." My heart clenched. Part of me, a small, childish part, wanted him to say yes. Wanted our family back the way it used to be. But I knew too much now. We'd all been through too much. I told her no, Dad said firmly. I told her that ship had sailed a long time ago, and that I wouldn't put you or Amy through that again. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Good," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. "You deserve better, Dad. We all do." There was a pause, and when Dad spoke again, I could hear the smile in his voice. "When did you get so wise, Lizzie?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I learned from the best." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my room at Grandma's house. My textbooks were spread out on the desk, next to a stack of reports from the company. Photos of me with Dad and Amy smiled back at me from the bulletin board. This wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself a year ago. It wasn't perfect, there was still so much to figure out, so many challenges ahead. But it was real. It was mine. I thought about Mom, suddenly alone after all her scheming and manipulations. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was overshadowed by a sense of justice. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a family that loved me, a company to run, and a future full of possibilities. It wasn't the path I'd expected, but standing at the threshold of my new life, I realized something important. Time flies when you're juggling college and a multi-million-dollar company. Before I knew it, I was halfway through my degree, buried in textbooks and financial reports. Weekdays were a blur of lectures and late-night study sessions. But weekends? Those were sacred. Every Friday, I'd pack a bag and head home to Dad and Amy. "Lizzie," Amy would squeal, tackling me with a hug the moment I walked in. At 10, she was all gangly limbs and endless energy. Dad would emerge from the kitchen, usually wearing an apron. Just in time for dinner, he'd say with a grin. Those weekends became my anchor. We'd eat together, Amy chattering about school, Dad and I discussing the company. After Amy went to bed, we'd often stay up late, poring over business strategies. Sundays usually found us at Grandma's. She'd cook up a storm, filling the house with the smell of roast chicken and apple pie. After lunch, we'd sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. "I always knew you had it in you, Elizabeth," Grandma would say, squeezing my hand. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Dad was true to his word, running the company with skill while preparing me to take over. "I'm ready to hand over the reins whenever you are," he told me one evening. I hugged him tight. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Life wasn't perfect. There were challenges ahead, decisions to be made, a company to run. But as I looked at my little family, Dad, Amy, Grandma, I knew we could face anything together.
Hey everyone, I'm Sandra, a 28-year-old artist trying to carve out a life in the big city. Right now, I'm in my tiny studio apartment, surrounded by canvases and brushes, when my phone rings. It's my brother Michael, and I immediately know it can't be good news. "Aunt Meredith's gone, Sandra. Heart attack." Just like that, my world shatters. Aunt Meredith wasn't just an aunt. She was my rock, my everything. When my parents were too caught up in their own chaos, she stepped in, becoming the mother I never had. I can still remember the first time she brought me to her antique shop. I was about 7, with scraped knees and messy pigtails. "This old chair has a story, Sandra," she would say, running her fingers over the worn wood of a Victorian piece. "Everything here does, just like you and me." She'd let me set up a little corner in the shop where I could draw and paint, and customers would stop and admire my childish scribbles. Aunt Meredith beamed with pride. "My little artist," she'd call me. As I grew up, the gap between me and my brothers, Michael, Thomas, and Daniel, widened. They never understood why Aunt Meredith and I were so close. They didn't see the hours we spent together, the way she encouraged my love for art while they were off doing their own thing. "Why don't you get a real job?" Thomas would sneer every time I mentioned my art. "Yeah, stop mooching off Aunt Meredith," Daniel would add. But Aunt Meredith always stood up for me. "Art is as real as it gets," she'd say. "Sandra's got a gift." Now, as I pack a small bag for her funeral, memories flood back. The smell of furniture polish, the jingle of the bell above the door, Aunt Meredith's warm laugh as she told me the stories behind each piece in her shop. I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, red-rimmed eyes, paint-stained hands. I look a mess, but I can almost hear Aunt Meredith's voice. "You're beautiful, Sandra, inside and out." My phone buzzes with messages from my brothers. They're already talking about Aunt Meredith's will and what she might have left behind. It makes me sick. Locking my apartment door, I take a deep breath. I'm not ready to face a world without Aunt Meredith, but I know she'd want me to be strong. Little do I know, the drama that's about to unfold will test that strength in ways I never imagined. The funeral home feels suffocating, filled with people I barely know and the heavy scent of flowers and tension. I stand alone, away from my brothers who are huddled together, whispering and shooting glances my way. "Look at her, acting all innocent," I hear Michael mutter. I bite my lip, fighting back tears. This is about Aunt Meredith, not them. The lawyer, Mr. Simmons, clears his throat. We are gathered to read the last will and testament of Meredith Anderson. My heart races. He mentions small donations to charities. Then, and to my beloved niece, Sandra Anderson, I leave my antique shop, Meredith's Treasures, including all its contents and business assets. The room erupts. Thomas leaps to his feet, face red with anger. This is ridiculous. She manipulated Aunt Meredith. Daniel joins in. Sandra's been taking advantage of her for years. This isn't fair. Mr. Simmons raises his hands, trying to calm them. Gentlemen, this was Miss Anderson's express wish. I'm stunned, barely registering the chaos around me. The shop. Aunt Meredith left me the shop. I'm suddenly transported back to a quiet evening there just a few months ago. She was polishing an old mirror, her expression wistful. You know, Sandra, I always wanted children of my own, she said softly, her voice tinged with regret. I hugged her tightly. You've been more of a mother to me than anyone. Her eyes welled up, and you've been the daughter I never had. Back in the present, I realized the enormity of what she's given me. It's not just a shop, it's her legacy, her trust in me. Michael approaches, his voice low and menacing. You won't get away with this, Sandra. We'll contest the will. I hold my ground. This was Aunt Meredith's decision. Michael, not mine. As they storm out, Mr. Simmons hands me a set of keys. Miss Anderson also left this for you, he says, handing over an envelope. Inside there's a letter and a list of contacts. Art dealers, collectors, restoration experts. My mind spins with the possibilities. Later that week, while I'm sorting through paperwork in the shop, the bell above the door jingles. It's Thomas with a smug look on his face. Hope you're not getting too comfortable, sis. We've hired a lawyer, Victor Reeves. He's known for overturning wills. A chill runs through me, but I stay calm. This is what Aunt Meredith wanted, Tom. Why can't you respect that? He scoffs. Because it's not fair. You're not even blood related to her. His words sting, but I stand firm. Family isn't just about blood, Thomas. It's about love. As he storms out, slamming the door, I sink into Aunt Meredith's old chair. The shop feels like both a sanctuary and a battlefield now. I trace my fingers over the worn wood of the desk, feeling Aunt Meredith's presence all around me. I won't let them take this from us. I promise, I whisper to the empty room, the words hanging in the air like a vow I'm determined to keep. Days blend into weeks as I throw myself into running the shop. Every antique holds a memory of Aunt Meredith, and keeping the business alive feels like keeping a piece of her with me. It's tough, but I'm learning fast. One afternoon, the bell chimes, and in walks a familiar face. Hi, I'm Olivia. I used to come here all the time, she says with a warm smile. We chat, and I quickly learn that she's well connected in the local business scene. You know, Sandra, she says thoughtfully, I think you're doing a great job here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Her words boost my spirits, especially with the rumors circulating about me. Whispers of my mental state and worse. Questions about Aunt Meredith's competency when she wrote the will. I know it's my brothers stirring the pot. A few days later, I'm in the back room when I hear voices, my brothers and a man I don't recognize. Look, Victor, we need something solid. Michael is saying. Can you forge some documents or what? My blood runs cold. I peek out, seeing a slick guy in an expensive suit nodding. Leave it to me, he says confidently. We'll make it look like your aunt wanted to sell this place. Sandra won't know what hit her. Shaking, I call Olivia. They're trying to forge documents, Olivia. What do I do? She doesn't miss a beat. We fight fire with fire, honey. Let's set up some cameras in there. Catch them red-handed. The next day, we install hidden cameras and voice recorders throughout the shop. It feels wrong, sneaky, but I'm desperate. A week passes, and as I review the footage, I strike gold. Thomas and Daniel are in the shop after hours, planting forged papers in Aunt Meredith's old desk. Julie's going to freak when she finds these, Daniel says, laughing. Yeah, poor, unstable Sandra, Thomas adds. Can't handle running a business. It's for her own good, really. I feel sick, but at least now I have proof. The next day, they spring their trap. All three brothers show up, their faces etched with fake concern. Sandra, we need to talk, Michael starts. We're worried about you, Thomas chimes in, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Yeah, sis, you're not sleeping, you're barely eating. This shop is too much for you. I play along, curious to see how far they'll go. What are you saying? Daniel pulls out some papers. We found these in Aunt Meredith's desk. She was planning to sell the shop, Sandra. She knew it would be too much for you. I take the papers, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Oh really? That's interesting. They exchange triumphant glances, thinking they've won. You know, I say casually, it's funny you should mention these papers because I have something to show you too. I pull out my laptop and play the footage of them planting the documents, their faces drain of color. You recorded us? Michael sputters. I stand tall, feeling Aunt Meredith's strength surge through me. You bet I did. Now you have two choices. You can walk away and never bother me or this shop again. Or I can take this to the police. Your call. They storm out, hurling threats and insults, but for the first time since Aunt Meredith died, I feel truly in control. As I lock up the shop that night, I whisper to the quiet room, "We did it, Aunt Meredith. We protected your legacy. The battle's not over. I know that, but I'm ready for whatever comes next." Julie Anderson isn't backing down. A few days later, I'm sitting in a cozy cafe with Olivia and her friend, Detective Mia Thompson. My hands tremble slightly as I push play on the recordings. Their faces grow grim as they listen. "This is serious, Sandra," Mia says, her brow furrowed. "I can't officially investigate, but I'll look into it discreetly." Olivia squeezes my hand. "We've got your back, Honorable." Over the next few weeks, I pour myself into the shop while Mia digs deeper. One afternoon, she calls with news. This Victor Reeves character, he's got a history of shady dealings, nearly got disbarred twice. I feel a mix of vindication and disgust. Thanks, Mia. This helps a lot. Meanwhile, Olivia's been busy too. She introduces me to Jonathan, a respected art dealer. "Sandra, your work is extraordinary," he says, examining my paintings. "How about we organize an exhibition?" The exhibition is a whirlwind of preparation and nerves, but it's a massive success. As I bask in the afterglow, I overhear a conversation that chills me to the bone. "Yeah, the auction for Meredith's treasures is set for next week." Michael's voice drifts over. Panic surges through me. I immediately call Mia, who reassures me she'll be there. The day of the auction arrives, and I'm a bundle of nerves. I watch as my brothers strut in with Victor Reeves, smug and confident. They freeze when they see me. "What are you doing here, Sandra?" Thomas spits, venom in his voice. Before I can respond, Mia walks in, flanked by two officers. "Gentlemen, I think we need to talk," she says calmly. What follows is a blur. Accusations, evidence, and rapidly paling faces. Victor Reeves tries to make a break for it, but he's quickly apprehended. "You're facing disbarment and potential criminal charges, Mr. Reeves," Mia states coldly. My brothers stand shell-shocked. Michael's phone rings. It's his boss, firing him on the spot. Thomas's wife storms in, engagement ring in hand, and throws it at him before storming out. Daniel frantically tries to contact his business partners, but it's too late. They've already cut ties. As the dust settles, I feel a strange mix of sadness and relief. It's over, I whisper to myself. In the months that follow, I pour my heart into transforming the shop. Meredith's Treasures becomes a unique blend of an antique shop and an art gallery where my own work hangs alongside carefully curated pieces, each with a story to tell. 1 year later, I'm arranging a new exhibition when my phone buzzes. It's Michael. "Sandra, please. We were wrong. Can't we talk?" I take a deep breath, thinking of all the pain they caused me. "No, Michael. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same." As I hang up, my eyes fall on a photo of Aunt Meredith. I smile, feeling her presence. "We did it, Aunt Meredith," I say softly. "Your legacy lives on, and I'm finally living my dream." I turn back to my canvas, brush in hand, ready to create something beautiful. The shop bell tinkles as a customer enters, and I smile. This is where I belong. This is my victory. And as for my brothers, they're learning the hard way that karma is real. "Welcome to Meredith's Treasures," I call out, my voice strong and sure. "How can I help you today?" Sandra's journey through betrayal and triumph has come to an end, but we want to hear from you. If you were in her shoes, would you have given your brothers a second chance after their betrayal? Or was cutting ties the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Hey everyone, I'm Olivia Thompson. I'm 17, a senior in high school, and to say my life's been a whirlwind these past few years would be an understatement. 3 years ago, my world collapsed when I lost my mom to cancer. I thought nothing could hurt worse, but life had more surprises. Dad remarried faster than I expected, bringing Karen, my new stepmother, and her daughter Megan into the picture. I tried to be hopeful, new family, fresh start, right? Wrong. From day one, it was obvious Karen had her own vision for this so-called blended family. Megan instantly became the star of the show, the golden child. And me? I was practically invisible. "Olivia, honey, we're having dinner at 6. Karen would remind me, knowing full well I had work or debate club. "Sure, Karen. I'll try to make it," I'd say, already knowing I wouldn't. My job at the local bookstore and my school activities became my escape. Every night, I come home exhausted, only to find a cold plate of leftovers in the fridge. Meanwhile, the scent of Karen's freshly cooked dinner for Megan still filled the air. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. "Dad, did you save any of the roast for me?" I asked, hoping for a shred of consideration. He looked up from his laptop, puzzled. "Oh, I thought you ate at work, sweetie. There's some leftover pasta in the fridge." I bit my lip, swallowing the hurt. "Right, thanks." As I microwaved the stale pasta, I could hear Karen and Megan laughing together in the living room, probably sharing another inside joke. One I wasn't part of. Dad's barely around these days, always working late, completely oblivious to the tension suffocating our house. We used to be close, but now it's like we're strangers living under the same roof. He'd ask, "How was your day, Olivia?" without even looking up from his phone. "Fine," I'd mutter, knowing he wasn't really listening. The worst part? Watching Karen dote on Megan like she's royalty, while I'm just an afterthought. Megan gets new clothes, the latest gadgets, home-cooked meals. I'm lucky if Karen remembers to grab my favorite cereal at the store. "Mom, can we go shopping this weekend?" Megan would ask, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Of course, darling. We'll make a day of it," Karen would reply, never once acknowledging me. I tried talking to Dad about it, but he brushed me off. "Olivia, you're overreacting. Karen's trying her best. Give her a chance." A chance? It's been 3 years of cold leftovers and colder shoulders. How many more chances does she need? So here I am, stuck in this house that doesn't feel like home anymore, counting down the days until graduation. My room has become my sanctuary, filled with memories of my mom and dreams of a future far away from this place. Sometimes I stare at old family photos and wonder how things would be if Mom were still here. Would she see through Karen's act? Would she stand up for me? But there's no use dwelling on what ifs. For now, I just have to survive, one cold meal at a time. This isn't the family I wanted, but it's the one I've got. Someday, I'll have my own life, my own rules. No more leftovers. No more being treated like I don't exist. Until then, I'll keep working, studying, and dreaming of a future where I'm more than an afterthought. Because one thing's for sure, I'm done settling for scraps in my meals and in my life. But then came the final straw. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it, a Nordstrom receipt tucked into Karen's purse. $500 for a dress, for Megan. My blood boiled as I remembered Dad handing Karen money for groceries just yesterday. "What are you doing in my room?" Karen's voice sliced through my shock. I spun around, clutching the receipt. "Where's the food, Karen? Dad gave you money for groceries, not designer clothes." Her face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Mind your own business, you ungrateful brat. Your father works hard to provide for this family." "This family? You mean you and Megan?" "I'm eating ramen while she's getting $500 dresses," I snapped. Karen ripped the receipt from my hand. "Get out of my room. Now." I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, my hands shaking as I texted Zoe, "Need to talk. Meet me at the park." An hour later, I sat on our usual park bench, spilling everything to Zoe. "Girl, you need to tell your dad," she said, her eyes wide. I sighed. He won't believe me. He never does. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Where are you?" "Family dinner tonight." I groaned. Great. Another performance of the Karen and Megan show. Zoe squeezed my hand. "Go, but document everything. We'll figure this out." When I got home, the rich aroma of pot roast filled the air, making my stomach growl. A painful reminder of the meager lunch I'd had earlier. As I stepped into the dining room, Karen's voice cut through the moment. "Nice of you to join us," she said, dripping with sarcasm. I clenched my jaw and took a seat. Dad was already at the table, absorbed in his phone, like always. "How was everyone's day?" he asked, without looking up. Megan immediately launched into a detailed account of her day, twirling her fork in the perfectly portioned meal on her plate. I glanced down at my own plate, noticeably smaller. "Oh, Daddy," Megan chimed in, her voice saccharine sweet. "I got an A on my math test today." "That's my girl." Dad beamed, finally lifting his head to acknowledge her. "We should celebrate. How about that new phone you've been wanting?" I couldn't hold back any longer. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. She gets a new phone for an A, while I'm valedictorian, and I can't even get new sneakers. The table fell into a stunned silence. Dad's face darkened. Olivia, that's enough. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I spat back, my voice rising. Open your eyes, Dad. Karen's using your money to spoil Megan while I'm treated like Cinderella. Karen gasped theatrically. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. Done for me? What have you done except make me feel like an outsider in my own home? Dad's hand slammed down on the table, rattling the dishes. That's enough, Olivia. Apologize to Karen now. I stood my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Apologize? For telling the truth. You're just jealous of Megan, Dad said, his voice cold and detached. I thought I raised you better than this. Tears blurred my vision as I turned and stormed out, Karen's fake sobs echoing behind me. In my room, I slammed the door and collapsed onto my bed, the weight of it all crashing down on me. The next day at school, I couldn't focus. My English teacher, Ms. Larson, noticed something was off and pulled me aside after class. Olivia, is everything all right? Before I knew it, I was pouring out everything to her, tears streaming down my face as she listened, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. Olivia, this isn't right, she said softly. Have you thought about talking to a school counselor? I shook my head. They'll just call my dad. He won't believe me. Ms. Larson sighed. Then we need to gather evidence, document everything, and remember, you're not alone in this. A small flicker of hope ignited in me. Maybe, just maybe, someone would finally believe me. But for now, I had to go home and face another night of leftovers and loneliness. I was done with Karen's games. It was time to fight back. With Zoe's help, we started Operation Expose Karen. We set up tiny hidden cameras in the common areas of the house and kept a detailed log of every incident. You sure this is legal? Zoe asked as we positioned a camera on the bookshelf. Probably not, I whispered back, but neither is stealing. Days passed and the evidence piled up. Karen accidentally spilling bleach on my favorite sweater, Megan bragging about her new iPhone while I struggled with a cracked screen, and the kicker, Karen's hushed phone calls moving money from our family account into her personal one. Meanwhile, I threw myself into school. When I won the state writing competition, I thought maybe, just maybe, Dad would notice. Congrats, sweetie, he said, barely glancing up from his laptop. But someone else did notice. Sarah Chen, a local journalist, reached out to me after reading one of my essays. Your story about family dynamics was powerful, she said over coffee. Have you thought about pursuing journalism? For the first time in months, I felt truly seen. I'm applying to colleges now, I told her. Journalism is definitely on the list. Her eyes lit up. Keep in touch. I might have an internship opportunity for you. At home, though, things were only getting worse. One night, I overheard Karen and Megan in the kitchen. Mom, why do we even keep her around? Megan whined. Karen's laugh was cold. Don't worry, sweetie. Once she turns 18, we'll make sure she's out of our hair for good. My blood ran cold. I had to get out of there. The next day, I was in my room, filling out college applications, when I heard a crash from the hallway. Rushing out, I found Karen standing over the shattered remains of my mom's photo album. Oops, she said, smirking. Accidents happen. Something inside me snapped. You did that on purpose. I screamed, dropping to my knees to gather the scattered photos. Prove it, Karen sneered. Just then, Dad walked in. What's going on here? Through my tears, I explained everything. To my shock, Karen didn't even bother to deny it. It's just some old photos, Jack. She's overreacting, as usual. I looked at Dad, praying he'd finally see the truth. His face was unreadable. Karen, we need to talk, he said quietly. Olivia, go to your room. I went, but not before grabbing my hidden camera from the bookshelf. Hours later, Dad knocked on my door. His eyes were red. Olivia, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I handed him my phone, showing him the videos, the logs, everything. I should have believed you, he said, his voice breaking. What happens now? I asked, barely daring to hope. Dad took a deep breath. Karen and Megan are leaving. I've already called a lawyer. Relief washed over me, but the victory was tinged with sadness. How had it come to this? As Dad hugged me, I realized this wasn't the end but a new beginning. I had colleges to apply to, a potential internship to pursue, and a relationship with my father to rebuild. For the first time in years, I could breathe again. The war was over, and I had won, but the real victory was finally being heard. The next morning, I woke to raised voices downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. How could you do this, Karen? To my daughter, to our family? Your daughter. Karen shot back. What about Megan? You've never treated her like your own. I gave you both everything, Dad said, his voice tight with anger. And you stole from us. You manipulated me. There was a loud crash, followed by Karen's shrill voice. This is all Olivia's fault. She's turned you against us. No, Karen, you did that all on your own. The argument raged on, but I'd heard enough. Retreating to my room, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety swirling in my stomach. Days passed in a blur. Karen and Megan moved out, leaving behind a house that felt emptier, but freer too. Dad threw himself into making amends, but years of neglect weren't going to be fixed overnight. I'm so sorry, Olivia, he'd say, his voice heavy with regret. I should have seen it sooner. I'd nod, not quite ready to forgive, but willing to try. Then came the day Sarah's article was published. Family Secrets. A daughter's fight for justice was splashed across the front page of the local paper. My story, our story, was laid bare for all to see. The community reaction was swift. People I'd known my whole life looked at me differently, some with pity, others with admiration. Karen and Megan became pariahs almost overnight. Did you hear? Karen's been fired from the bank, Zoe whispered during lunch. Apparently, she'd been embezzling there too. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly, I just felt tired. I just wanted to be over, I told her. But it wasn't quite over. As valedictorian, I had to give a speech at graduation. Standing at the podium, I looked out over the sea of familiar faces, some of which I wish I could forget. We've all faced challenges, I began, my voice shaky. Some visible, some hidden behind closed doors. But it's not the challenges that define us. It's how we face them. I caught Dad's eye in the crowd, and he nodded, urging me on. We have the power to write our own stories, to choose resilience over resentment, growth over stagnation. When I finished, the applause washed over me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. After the ceremony, Sarah approached me smiling. That internship is yours if you want it, she said. Your story. It's making a difference, Olivia. I hugged Dad tightly, holding my diploma. I'm proud of you, kiddo, he whispered, so proud. As we walked to the car, I spotted Karen and Megan in the distance, isolated and glaring. I felt a twinge of pity for them, but it passed quickly. They'd made their choices. I wasn't looking back. Ahead of me, I saw a future full of possibilities, college, the internship, a chance to help others who'd been silenced. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. After all, I'd already survived the worst. What would you have done in Olivia's place? Would you have confronted your family earlier or taken a different approach? Share your thoughts in the comments.